Hi, welcome to today's history lesson. Let's put me up here. Okay, so as you all know, we are studying ancient Egypt, and instead of our textbook, I'm going to go ahead and today use a Britannica Encyclopedia Online article. And so you can see it's titled Ancient Egypt. And your assignment and our assignment together today is to read the first 5 paragraphs. So if you would like, you can obviously watch the video at your own pleasure, but let's get these numbered. So this is going to be paragraph number 1. Okay. And here are 2 and 3. And here are 4 and 5. Okay, so there is the length of the reading we're going to do today. Okay, now if I were looking at this, I would look at my title, Ancient Egypt, and I know that that's what we're studying, the Fertile Triangle, that area, very northern Africa. Okay. I'd look at my subtitle, same subtitle, and then Introduction to Ancient Egyptian Civilization, and another subtitle, Life in Ancient Egypt. Okay, so we've done that. Now, if I were reading this myself, I would preview the first sentences. So when I do a preview, I come and look at this sentence, for instance. Ancient Egypt, civilization in northern Africa that dates from the 4th millennium BC. Okay, that is a good first sentence for a paragraph, and I want to read it just so I know that that paragraph is going to be about that civilization. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and erase that real quick. Okay, and now come down to our next one, and we read the other first sentences. So, ancient Egypt can be thought of as an oasis in the desert of northeastern Africa, dependent on the annual inundation of the Nile River to support its agricultural population. Okay, we'll go over that more. Then, the first cataract at Aswan, where the riverbed is turned into rapids by a belt of granite, was the country's only well-defined boundary within a populated area. Okay, and so as we've learned in history before, this idea of boundaries or natural boundaries will be pretty important to any historical story. And I believe we have see here 2 more paragraphs. The first sentence of this one reads, to the northeast was the Isthmus of Suez. Isthmus is a really interesting kind of geographic feature we'll talk about in a minute. And then the last paragraph for today, at first, relatively little cultural contact came by way of the Mediterranean Sea, but from an early date, Egypt maintained trading relations with the Lebanese port of Bilbos. Okay. So that would be our preview. So I'm going to go ahead and erase all this now and go back to the beginning of our article. And let's just do a shared reading. And what I'm hoping is that you have linked to this and you're either following with me or you're following on the other side with yours. So I'm going to begin with reading Ancient Egypt right here. back. And here I go. Ancient Egypt, civilization in northeastern Africa that dates from the 4th millennium BCE. Its many achievements, preserved in its art and monuments, hold a fascination that continues to grow as archaeological finds expose its secrets. This article focuses on Egypt from its prehistory through its unification under Menes, Narmer, in the 3rd millennium BCE, sometimes used as a reference point for Egypt's origin, and up to the Islamic conquest of the 7th century BCE or CE. For subsequent history through the contemporary period, see Egypt. So in other words, this article is going to cover the period of time we call ancient Egypt. And it's going to go through about the 7th century AD, or after Christ's birth. Okay, introduction to ancient Egyptian civilization, life in ancient Egypt. Ancient Egypt can be thought of as an oasis in the desert of northeastern Africa, dependent on the annual inundation of the Nile River to support its agricultural population. I'm going to step out for a minute here and think. So, the Nile River we've talked about in class. Remember, it floods annually. And it creates an agricultural population, meaning the base economic activity of these people, how they're going to make a living, support each other and themselves, is through agriculture, growing crops, growing food. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and pick my reading back up where I left off. The country's chief wealth came from the fertile floodplain in the Nile Valley, where the river flows between bands of limestone hills and the Nile Delta, in which it fans into several branches north of present-day Cairo. Between the floodplain and the hills is a variable band of low desert that supported a certain amount of game. The Nile was Egypt's sole transportation artery. So not only is the Nile providing them with their water for food to grow crops, it's also their main form of transportation. This is how they're getting around. They're using, well, we'll just call them boats for now. They're going to go on a river with boats. Okay, continuing. The first cataract at Aswan, where the riverbed is turned into rapids by a belt of granite, was the country's only well-defined boundary within a populated area. To the south lay the far less hospitable area of Nubia, in which the river flowed through low sandstone hills that in most regions left only very narrow strip of cultivatable land. And right here, when they say cultivatable, this just means land that you could grow food on. Okay. Nubia was significant for Egypt's periodic southward expansion and for access to products from farther south. West of the Nile was the arid, hot and dry, arid Sahara, broken by a chain of oases some 125 to 185 miles from the river and lacking in all other resources except a few minerals. And here we need, when we talk about minerals right here, when we talk about minerals, these are the precious stones that they would use to trade and make jewelry and stuff. Okay, continuing. The eastern desert between the Nile and the Red Sea was more important for it supported a small nomadic population and desert game, contained numerous mineral deposits, including gold, and was the route to the Red Sea. So this means it's going to be a route to an ocean. It's going to be important for trade. Okay. To the northwest was the Isthmus of Suez. It offered the principal route for contact with Sinai, from which came turquoise and possibly copper. And with southwestern Asia, Egypt's most important area of cultural interaction, from which they received stimuli for a technical development and cultivars, plants for crops. Immigrants and ultimately invaders crossed the isthmus into Egypt, attracted by the country's stability and prosperity. From the late second millennium BCE onward, numerous attacks were made by land and sea along the East Mediterranean coast. At first, relatively little cultural contact came by way of the Mediterranean Sea, but from an early date, Egypt maintained trading relations with Lebanese port of Bilbis, present-day Jebel. Egypt needed few imports to maintain basic standards of living, but good timber, wood, was essential and not available within the country, so it was usually obtained from Lebanon. Minerals such as obsidian, lapis lazuli, were imported from as far afield as Anatolia and Afghanistan. Okay, before I close this section, because that is the end of our reading, I do want to talk about this idea of an isthmus. And an isthmus is an interesting thing. So the word we're looking at is this word right here, isthmus. And an isthmus is a geographic feature. And what I want you to picture is a piece of land. Let's just say this piece of land is real wide, okay? It's a piece of land. And then there's a narrow band of land between it and then another larger piece of land. This would be the isthmus. It's a narrow, almost land bridge between two larger land masses that's surrounded on two sides by water. Okay, this is land right here. So you have water here and water here, and this is land. This is an isthmus. Okay. The Central America can be considered an isthmus because it's this narrower piece of land between North America and South America. And if you look off the coast of Long Beach there, you see Catalina Island. And on the right-hand side of that, where you see a dip on it, that's an isthmus on that island. It's a little strip of land that connects two larger, wider ones on each side. Okay, so there endeth today's history lesson. I hope everybody's having a good day, and I look forward to seeing your responses on Padlet and other things. Goodbye for now.